Well, welcome back to another segment of Observations. I am Craig. I'm here with my brothers, both Kirk and Scott, expecting Larry before long. And we're going to actually backtrack a bit today. In our last segment of Observations, we focused on what Shamuel means he listens to God, had to say in a conversation with Yahowah about the people's desire to have a government like other nations. And we were just beginning to consider what God had to say about human governments. But what I noticed is that there really is a very important discussion that takes place before this, and it is just God's nature. God very seldom issues a warning without first having provided a solution. Now, he will first tell us, this is what is in your interest. If you do these things, this will be the beneficial outcome. And then he says, but if you choose another option, for example, human government over a relationship with him, he then tells you what you should expect from that government. So I wanted to turn back the pages of our review to what takes place really in the previous chapter of Samuel. And I thought that the best way to set that up would be to expose one of the most glaring contradictions in the book that Christians lug around that they have labeled the Bible. Now, I use the term they have labeled because Bible is at best based upon the Greek/Phoenician/Egyptian word biblos. And biblos is a town that was named after the Egyptian god Biblia. But there is actually a Hebrew root for Bible. It's Babel. And Babel means with the Lord, with Baal. Baal is the Lord, the chief deity of Babylon, which in Yahowah we learn is Satan himself. So Bible means with Satan. Wow. And if you look at the actual meaning of the Hebrew word Babel, it means to confuse. So we use the term Bible only to expose and condemn the name that Christians have given to their book. But within that book, it is absolutely filled with contradictions. The first 80% of the book is an absolute and complete, irrefutable conflict with the last quarter. What Christians have done to create an Old and a New Testament, neither of which is appropriate. They are in wholesale conflict with each other, total and complete contradictions. I don't think there is a more glaring conflict than the one that Paul authors in his New Testament, where he tells us that we should surrender and submit to government, and that all governments are there for good, and that God has appointed the leaders of every government. So, since Paul's view on government is the antithesis of God's presentation and acrimony towards government, I thought it might be interesting for us first to begin this review by citing what the most despicable man who ever lived, the man that Yahowah calls the plague of death, wrote in the 13th chapter of a book that he penned on behalf of all people, the Romans. What did he have to say, Kirk?
Well, let's see here. The most confusing man in the world, speaking of confusing, he says, let every person be in subjugation to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those which exist or established by God. Number 1, he says, therefore, he who resists authority has opposed the ordinances of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear or authority?
No fear of authority.
Yeah.
Do you want to have no fear of authority?
No fear of authority, I'm sorry. Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger, who brings wrath upon the one who practices evil. Wherefore, it is necessary to be in subjugation. It's hard not to make comments on these things. Not only
I'm having you read it because I got the willies just in writing it. Even though I chose here to just look it up in a standard translation because I really am so repulsed by Paul. The whole thought of going to his original Greek and then trying to render it from the Greek to me is nauseating. So I'm just going to write it from down from an existing translation, and even the process of doing it, I want to puke. So I am, as the host of this show, I am asking my good friend Kirk to read this morning. Yeah, because I don't think I could read it without commenting and condemning every point.
Yeah, so but we're almost through it. So
okay.
Therefore is it necessary to be in subjugation, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this you also pay taxes. For rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Render to all what is due them, tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Romans 13:1-7. Ooh, a lot of material there.
Ooh, calling Paul's poison pen preposterous is being way too generous. His statement, this particular statement, may be among the most insane propositions ever attributed to God. It presents all governments as good, when both history and current events affirm an entirely different reality. Considering what Rome did to its Judean province in 70 CE, and again in 133 CE, one would have thought that this insane man's letter to the Romans, which in actuality is the cornerstone of Pauline Christianity, would have been tossed aside as a preposterous hoax. But unfortunately, in matters of religion, only 1 in a million believers think. You know, as I examine this, I'm not surprised that Paul wrote at the end of his earthly existence. He, of course, lives on now in a place known as Sheol, which bears his name, Sheol and Shaul, from the same Hebrew root. It means to question. In the case of Shaul, question him. In the case of Sheol, the place of questioning. It is the abyss. It's what Christians would call hell. It is it's akin to a black hole, where those who have led others astray are incarcerated for all time. That when Paul wrote this, shortly after Paul wrote this, he claimed to be, falsely I think, a prisoner of the Romans. He wasn't in any Roman prison, but he claims he was under house arrest. I think he was just quivering in fear. And he wrote his one love interest in the world, Timothy, that everyone had abandoned him, that he had no one anymore, no followers, no friends, no supporters, that he was all alone. And that's not surprising. But what is somewhat surprising is that by 400 CE, this is after Marcion had collected and distributed Paul's letters and created a New Testament based upon Paul's letters and a highly edited version of Luke. Luke served as Paul's attaché. And he distributed those to create a new Gnostic religion. And then later, we find the Roman Catholic Church embracing all of this, particularly embracing Pauline doctrine and imposing the Christian religion, Pauline Christianity. But between the time that Paul was rejected by all who knew him and the time that Theodosius in 400 CE imposed Christianity as an integration of religion and politics in imperial Rome, what we find is that Rome was more savage than any nation that had ever existed, and that their savagery wasn't broad-based at that time. It was focused on the Judean province. It was focused on Israel. It was focused on the very thing that God loves. And so Paul wrote that all governments, in a letter that was written specifically to and of the Roman government, was authorized by God and only wielded the sword for good, and that you should be subjected to them. And yet this was the very same government that not only killed the body of Yahowah, subjecting it to their most gruesome torture. The Romans that did that, not the Jews. And that this is the nation that shortly thereafter tore down Yahowah's temple. And that they used the booty that they had looted from it and the slaves that they had conquered around it to build the most decadent arena in all of human history, the Roman Colosseum. The most perverse arena, a place where death was celebrated. And then, to make matters worse, in 133 CE, the Romans came back and they separated all Yehudim from Israel. They renamed Israel after the Philistines. They assaulted the ground. They destroyed the towns. They murdered hundreds of thousands of the chosen people. And this is the very government that Paul wants you to believe is an implement of God for good.
Right.
If that's true, then their God is the most vicious, the most incomprehensible, the most duplicitous and repulsive deity ever conceived by man.
It would be comparable to Allah.
Yeah.
Because he's more treacherous.
Even more treacherous than Allah. Yeah. Exactly. And so, having written this, you would think that people would have come to the conclusion that rather than canonizing his 13 letters so that they comprise half of the Christian New Testament, that they would say this is the most preposterous, the most insane group of letters ever conceived by man.
It should have been
and rejected.
Yeah.
Now, when we compare Paul's tribute to Roman authority to what God revealed to Daniel, we're confronted by one of the most cathartic conflicts in the whole of the Christian Bible. Yahowah told his prophet Daniel that this very same Roman government was an ungodly beast, that it was demonic and vicious. He then revealed that the governmental authority which would grow out of imperial Rome via a lowly and little horn, which is the Roman Catholic Church based on Pauline doctrine, would be far worse. He said that the beast that would grow out of Rome, the governmental authority, which is the Roman Catholic Church, that would grow out of Rome, was the most counterproductive and vicious regime in human history. One which would be dreadful and terrifying, to use God's words, predicting that it would crush and devour the world. Does that sound like something that an entity that only uses the sword for good? Does that sound like something that God has authorized and appointed?
He would never. It's impossible. It's a total impossibility. Or else it's a contradiction to everything he ever said.
Correct. In fact,
he didn't even ask you to fear him.
Of course. Yeah, in fact, rather than support Paul's position on government generally, and Rome specifically, God predicted that the Romans, through their empire and church, would have the single greatest negative influence on his creation.
And they've had tremendous influence on every culture, every
correct
government.
Yep. It would be out of Rome's influence, according to God, that the Torahless one, known to Christians as the Antichrist, would emerge. No empire in human history wielded its sword more often or more commonly for evil intent.
Suspicious.
By the way, which nation today has a Senate?
Oh, I think it's the United States.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we're sitting in it.
It's been snowed pretty good this week.
Yeah, indeed. So while the revelations found in Daniel are the antithesis of those promoted in favor of Roman authority by the man born as Shaul, this was far from Yahowah's initial or most comprehensive condemnation of government. As we have learned in our last two Shabbat programs on Blog Talk Radio, the first time that Yahowah assailed human governance is found in the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, early in the first book of the Torah, in Bereshith. When is that, Kirk?
Well, the first one he assails, of course, is Babylon, and then he assails...
Nope, even before Babylon. First book of the Torah, early in. That Yahweh was found not only condemning human governance, but eradicating it. Noah.
No, of course.
Yeah, most people have been led to believe that the story of Noah is that people weren't being religious; they were being ignoring God, and that God is a jealous God, wanted them to worship Him, and they weren't worshiping Him the way that He wanted, so He had a tizzy fit and created the flood.
Right.
But that's not. But that's not. Yeah, it's not what it says. There isn't a single reference to the people's relationship with God. And the fact is, all of the references shows that the people that he eliminated were overtly religious.
Mm-hmm.
He says that he says the reason that he wished that he had not created humankind was that human governance, man's tendency to perpetrate influence over his fellow man, was universally vicious, was demeaning, was counterproductive. It wasn't our relationship with God that caused God to extirpate.
No, he didn't have one with them mostly.
Yeah, he had none with them. It was their dealings with their fellow man.
Mm-hmm. And everything
harsh.
that was under them.
Right.
Killed everything.
Yep. So that is the reason. So the first condemnation of governmental influence is found in the story of Noah, which precipitated the flood. That's the reason for it.
If it had not been those sequence of events, it would have spread to the point there'd been nothing left.
Right.
In the one little major civilization there.
Correct.
And it would have been everything would have been aborted.
It was man's cruelty and viciousness against his fellow man that necessitated the flood. It was not mankind's lack of a relationship with God that caused him to reset humanity, but instead man's viciousness towards his fellow man. Now, the most complete criticism of government, and indeed some of the most revealing testimony ever presented to humankind occurs in 1 Samuel, immediately after the Israelites requested a king to rule over them. And this astute prognosis is particularly pertinent in this case because the man that the nation had chosen over Yahowah, what was his name? Shaul. Which makes God's revelation both historic and prophetic.
Yeah. Very pointed.
Because Shaul is the given name of the author of half of the Christian New Testament. Now, as we pick up the story of the despised Philistines, they had just returned the Ark of Yahowah, which we know as the Ark of the Covenant. What follows is one of the most amazing, revealing, and pertinent statements found anywhere in Yahweh's witness. And we're going to attempt to do it justice. As a matter of fact, we're going to cover this as a whole, and then in segments, and then we're going to drill down deep to overturn every stone so that we see what lies beneath the names of the two villains in this statement. One is Astarte, the other is Philistine.
Can I say one quick thing about Samuel? When you start to look it up in most of the Christian lexicons, dictionaries, they'll say Samuel is name of God because they do it as Shem instead of Shema. And it doesn't take very long before you look it up to enough places, and it's not. And I don't know if that's a big deal, but just to make the point that if someone is reading some of your translations, that if you go to check them, and you find something in a normal, like American Standard or in any of the others that translated, they'll say name of God or God's name, for his understanding of who he is, and it's not. He listens to God is Shamar.
Yeah, it's based upon the verb Shamar.
So when you go to those translations,
and by the way, there are very few names that Yahweh provides through his Torah, prophets, and Psalms that are based on two nouns. Name Shem is a noun.
Yeah.
El,
no action.
El is a noun. El is not God's name. It is one of God's titles.
Right.
And so there is no action. Yeah, there's no action. If you look at the names that Yahweh likes to use, they're verbs in conjunction typically with his name or title. And so these verbs are what communicates the action that's associated with the name. And in this particular case, Shamuel is he listens. Shamu means he listens. Is from Shama.
Right.
He listens to God.
Yeah. The only reason I want to make that point is because if you don't look hard, you'll get the same garbage that they give you at most of these Christian sites.
Yeah. Well, just even think about it though for a moment. Let's just say that Sham was name. Yeah, and SHM is name. But let's just say that Shem was name and Ol was of God. If that's the case, what is the name of God?
Well, it has to be El then.
Yeah, and by the way,
this is my name.
Yeah, and was Shamuel named God?
No, hardly.
Hardly.
Third. I mean, when you first see it, you go, what?
What does Shamuel say 100% of the time when he is speaking to or speaking for God? Does he say that I'm speaking for El?
No.
No, he says I'm speaking for Yahweh. So, well, I don't have any problem with name. The reality is that Shama means to listen.
Well, you lose It's the impact of it. He's the guy who listens to, why don't you?
All right. Yeah, and what do you find him doing? I mean, in this story, throughout this story, the thing that makes what Shemuel has to say meaningful is that he's constantly going to and listening to God and then sharing what Yahowah has to say to the people.
Mm-hmm.
The whole of the books of Shemuel are based upon him doing what his name depicts. So, I mean, I'd rest my case on that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to jump in there, but that's...
yeah.
So when you start translating a little bit, you can run across these things and you say, these people are nuts.
Yeah, they're crazy. Yeah, that's crazy.
Confusion again. I think
Right.
we covered at the first stage of German.
Yeah, I'm not even I don't think there's any place, by the way, where Shemuel announces the name of God as some profound insight that the people were unaware of.
Yeah.
He constantly uses the name Yahowah. He constantly addresses Yahowah. He speaks on behalf of Yahowah, but he's not a fellow that is pretending to introduce Yahowah to the people.
No, it's not a great revelation to them. They already know his name is Yahowah.
Yeah, they know that Shemuel is listening to Yahowah. They know that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's. I'll have you read this, Kirk, if you don't mind. Read. It's just this is considered. Yeah, this is considered one verse. Now, understand that there are no verses.
No.
And the original text. These are man-made divisions, but this is considered one verse. It's from 1 Shemuel. Listen to God, 7:3.
Okay. So now Samuel consistently spoke to the entire house of Israel for the purpose of drawing near by saying, if with all your heart you return to Yahowah, choosing to turn away from and removing accordingly the foreign pagan and worthless gods from among you, and in addition the Ashtar, the Queen of Heaven, the Mother of God, and the Virgin, the Child. Wow. And also choose to firmly fashion through unwavering preparation and confident determination your heart from Yahowah, and work with him, serving with him, while approaching him exclusively, which is important, then he will deliver you. He will deliver you out of the hand and influence of the Philistines, the foreign foes who invade the promised land, invoking fear while separating and terrorizing.
Indeed.
Well,
now let's look at this a bit more closely.
Mm-hmm.
It begins with now, in addition. So now, Shemuel, he listens to God. It is a compound of shama, to hear, to pay attention to perceive, and to understand. El, God Almighty. And then and what's important there is the reason that Shemuel had something valuable to say is because he said what God had revealed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you and I convey Yahowah's testimony, we're going to be worth listening to.
Yes.
So now Shemuel consistently spoke to. This is Amar El, actually promised and habitually declared on behalf of Almighty God, cognizant of the unfolding and ongoing consequence throughout time, always claiming and genuinely professing to the entire house. Now, boy, that's a considerable amount of amplification. But to get that application, not only from the additional meanings that are associated with Amar, to promise, to declare, to speak, to communicate, but also because of the stems. There's two stems. The stem here is the call stem. It tells us that you need to review what is being said literally, rather than look for nuances. That this should be interpreted as something that is actual and can be depended upon and genuine. And then it's in the imperfect conjugation. Now, the imperfect conjugation, very unique. Well, it's very common in Hebrew, but it conveys a unique concept to those of us who are in languages that are not as relationship influenced as is Hebrew. That it's a concept that is difficult for those whose mind works in English where there's a past, present, and future tense.
Right.
Because in Hebrew there is no past, present, and future tense. There's only ongoing behaviors or completed behaviors. That's all there are. And the completed behaviors doesn't reference time. It could be completed in the future.
Yes.
It could be a one-time event in the present, or an event that was done and ended in the past. We'll return to Observations after this break. Welcome back to Observations. We are considering Shamuel consistently speaking to the entire house or home family of Yisrael. And we have just considered the fact that Amar, which is the verb to promise, to declare, to speak, was modified by the call stem, which means that what follows should be interpreted literally rather than looking for some nuanced meaning. And that it was also shaded by the imperfect conjugation. Now, in Hebrew, verbs, and therefore the action associated with Yahweh's witness, are not stuck in time. Unlike English, there is no past, present, or future tense in Hebrew. Now, that realization alone should be startling and inspiring. Startling because since verbs do not have a past, present, or future tense, one cannot rationally say that God established testimony that was once valid but is no longer valid, was valid in the past but is not valid in the present or future.
Yes.
Because Hebrew is true throughout time. Yes, throughout time. There's no limitations of time on anything that is conveyed in Hebrew. So if you're a Christian holding a New Testament, you're in a whole world of hurt. Now, the second thing that should be inspiring about this is that Yahweh equates himself to his Torah. That Yahweh and his testimony are one. If you have seen Yahweh's testimony, you've seen Yahweh. If you know Yahweh's testimony, you know Yahweh. That he is manifest in our world by his testimony. He is eternal. He is not stuck in time. He was, he is, and he will be simultaneously, as is the language he chose to reveal himself.
And that should be a hard concept for Christians to grab because they talk about Yahweh as the Word.
Yes. Oh, but you think they're going to make it?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand the other problems, but I mean, here's a clue.
Yeah. Go ahead, Scott.
I feel like one of the biggest problems that they probably have, though, is that just the thought that you can have a relationship, that you don't have to be fearful, that you don't have to
bow down,
power, you don't have to constantly praise and worship and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. One day out of the week, he says, "Set this aside for me. Let's get together. Let's talk to me a little bit."
Yeah, it's like the Christian constantly repenting. Like Paul says, pray without ceasing. It's one and done. Your words should be a response to Yahweh's words. So if you accept the terms and conditions of the covenant, you only do it once. If you accept and act upon the invitations that Yahweh has laid out for us to become immortal, perfect, adopted, enriched, and empowered members of his family, so that you can live with him, then you have done it. You don't constantly need to be repeating yourself.
Or begging for him to forgive you again.
Yeah, or begging for him to forgive you again. Right.
Didn't see it.
Right. And so, with Hebrew's verbs existing throughout time, in Hebrew there are two conjugations that modify the duration of a statement's effect or of the act. One of them is the imperfect, the other is the perfect. Now, there are things which are a whole lot better conveyed in the imperfect, and there are things which are much better conveyed in the perfect. Let me give you an example. The 7 instructions that Yahweh etched on the second of the 2 tablets in stone, where he says, for example, you should not kill. He actually writes that in the perfect, which means you should not make a habit of killing. Where he says you should not commit adultery, he actually writes that in the imperfect, which means you should not make a habit of committing adultery. Where he says you shouldn't bear false witness, he says just don't make it part of your ongoing behavior to consistently and continually bear false witness. And the beauty of that is that if you have violated any one of those 7 instructions, including keeping the 7th day, as you mentioned, Scott, separate, special, the moment you begin to respect the 7th day and you keep it separate and special, then you're no longer in violation of the instruction. If you have borne false witness, which I did when I was a Christian, but you're no longer a Christian and no longer touting the lie of Christianity, then you're no longer in conflict with the instruction. So there's things that are a lot better for us written in the imperfect. And there are things like this, which Shamuel is doing. By writing it in the imperfect, what he is saying is that there is an unfolding, this is unfolding and habitual behavior, consistent and continual on behalf of Shamuel. This is what Shamuel did. Did it regularly, he did it consistently, he did it continually. He was always speaking on behalf of Yahweh to the entire house of Israel. That's what he did.
Now, to me, why that's so important is when we finally get to the thing where he says about government, which is even where we're leading. It means now, it means us, it means everybody.
Correct. It means them, it means us. And it means all the different governments between them and us. But also the imperfect says that everything that is being said under the influence of the imperfect has ongoing consequences.
Yes.
So what he's telling this audience has ongoing consequences to anyone who considers what follows, including us today. So that's the imperfect conjugation. So Shamuel literally and consistently spoke to the entire house of Israel. Now, house of Israel, isn't that kind of an odd? It certainly wasn't one big home there.
No, but when you think in terms of Bereth covenant,
family, and wasn't Israel? Wasn't that the name that Yahweh gave to Jacob after Jacob fathered what became the 12 tribes that created the family of Israel?
Right. Includes all the goy that joined with them.
Right. So, house of Israel is family. It's Be'eth. Be'eth means family. It means home and family. So he was speaking to the house of Yisrael. Yisrael in and of itself is an interesting word. It is a compound of 3 Hebrew words. Ish, which means individuals. Sarah, which means to engage and endure. And El with God. Now, it is interesting that the verb here is also a noun. Sarah. She was Ishak's mother, representing the birth of the covenant and Abraham's wife. Speaking of the family that became the covenant family.
It's a good thing to be called.
It's a good thing to be called. Now, there are times where Yahweh uses Yisrael to depict a nation that is estranged from him. Such is the case here. And there are times when he uses Yisrael to speak of the chosen people. There's times that he uses Israel to speak of the promised land. Sometimes he uses it to speak of his children. Yisrael is depictive of the descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob that are naturally born into the family that engages and endures with God, as well as those of us who choose to engage and endure with God. And it is currently, as Yisrael, estranged from God. And we're told about the divorce in the book named Hosea, which you'll find is Hosea. And it uses Ephraim to speak of all of Yisrael with the exception of really Yehudah.
Yeah.
And then in Yirmiyah, Yahowah tells us that he's going to reaffirm his covenant and renew it with Yisrael and with Yehudah. Not only bringing Yisrael and Yehudah together to complete everything that Yisrael originally stood for, but also to reconcile his relationship, the relationship between Yisrael, Yehudah, and Yahowah. So when we speak of Yisrael, it's important to know who they are. You need to know who they are because you need to decide, do you want to be counted among them? Particularly in the ultimate reconciliation with Yahowah, particularly since this is the basis of his covenant. And that's really important because so many people have been conditioned into believing that anything that is said to Yisrael, which they transliterate Israel, is therefore to the Jews, and that's in their Old Testament, and it no longer applies. That's, I guess, that God could not be trusted, that God made a bad choice, and that God's testimony and promises cannot be relied upon. So we ought to instead believe the promises made by a man who admitted that he was demon-possessed, ruthless, and insane.
Perverted.
And a sexual pervert. Yes, he admitted to all those things. As for me, I'm not going to choose to believe the man who admitted that he was demon-possessed, vicious, perverted, and insane.
And would lie on top of the head.
Yeah, and says, while he writes, I cannot lie, he also writes that I will pretend to be what I'm not to gain an advantage over people.
So I guess that's not false witness. under whose definition?
Under Satan's definition.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
So he spoke to the house of Israel, and you, as a listener, need to decide whether you or not you want to be a part of the family that engages and endures with God.
With God, yeah.
As for me, I count myself as Yisrael in the intended sense of the word. And in the reconciled state of the word.
Me too.
Now, one of the things that's interesting, too, here, because God's not stuck in time, like his word. When God says that Yisrael is currently estranged from him, and then he says that Yisrael will be reaffirmed and reunited, reconciled with him, then Yisrael exists in both states. Then there are those of Yisrael who are currently estranged, and there are those with Yisrael who are united.
Indeed.
So be careful of rejecting this message because it's to the house of Yisrael, unless you don't want to be counted amongst those who engage and endure with God, in which case, why are you listening to this program anyway?
Yeah, why read his word?
Yeah, why consider it?
Carry it around with you.
Yeah. Now, it says, for the purpose of drawing near by saying. This is the preposition law followed by Amar again. The preposition law is interesting, and we'll consider it more in depth in a moment, but it means to move towards. And Amar here is again qualified, modified by the call stem, but this time by the infinitive construct. The infinitive construct is a declaration which should be the call infinitive, which should be interpreted literally, and which is true with regard to everyone, in every place and throughout time. The infinitive construct says that what is being conveyed pertains to everyone, every place, at all times. It liberates the statement from being constrained to a particular people in a particular place or in a particular time. So infinitive construct means this should be viewed as a valid statement, particularly in the call, as a valid statement for all people in all places for all time.
Theologians know that. So,
well, they should. I don't know. I don't know. What you have to be careful of here is that those who go to Bible college and who get degrees from seminary
have an a priori.
Well, they will take a little Hebrew on occasion. Not all of them. They'll take some Hebrew.
Oh, really?
They mostly, a very little bit of Hebrew, and most of the Hebrew they're going to study is modern Hebrew, as it was both filtered by the Masoretes, and then refiltered to become the language of the modern state of Israel. So by religion and politics, I don't think there's any of them that go back to the roots, that do what you have done, which is to look at the letters that comprise the words, because the letters all paint pictures of what the words represent.
Well, even the ones that do that, they still are stuck in the Christian frame. I mean, it's like everything I go to translate through all my different sources and things, which are growing, is you have to have a filter. I mean, they throw in the Christian stuff or the Jewish stuff, rabbinical Judaism. If you don't know, I have like 100 words that, okay, I know if it don't mean this, or if they say it doesn't mean this, they're wrong. And then you go through and prove it. But you really have to have a filter. You got to have a perspective, which is the best thing that happened to me around the Cross Youth, to be quite honest, is now I have a filter so I can read this stuff and not be, oh, wait a minute. That's
yeah. Well, let's just look at Israel, for example.
Yeah.
The first letter is the Y. It's the Yod. It was originally called a Yod. Yod to this day means hand in Hebrew. It was drawn to depict the upper arm reaching down, the forearm reaching out with an open hand.
Open hand, right.
Yeah, that's the Yod. And so it's the first letter of Yahweh's name. It's the first letter of Yisrael. So it's Yahweh's hand reaching down and out to us. The second letter of Yisrael is the Shin, which is depicted as teeth. And it's the words that nourishing words would be the most complete definition of it.
Right.
So the hand and the word of Yahweh. Right? And then it's the Rosh here is the individual who is listening, seeing. So it's an individual.
It's head, so I mean, so everything your intellect, not your body, where it's standing or anything, is just absolutely intense.
Right. So the hand of Yahweh reaching down, and his nourishing words for the observant person.
Right.
And then the last two letters are El, which is the title that Yahweh applies to himself. The first letter is the Aleph, which is the ram.
Ram.
The ram is part of the flock, and yet he's the defender of the flock.
Right.
He protects the flock. The ram leads the flock. And the next letter is the Lamed, which is the shepherd. Shepherd.
Leading you on a path.
Leading you, right.
Right.
So this is Yahweh's hand and his words, leading and protecting those who are observant, those who listen and observe what he has to say.
And that's what he asked you to do? Observe the Torah? Observe the mitzvah that observe
So my point was made. Most people who go to seminary, to Bible school, do not study Hebrew. And the Hebrew, they never look at the Hebrew of Revelation. And they spend a lot of time studying Greek, but God never spoke Greek.
It's a weak language for this.
Right, yeah. You know, the Christian Jesus, who's really Yahowah, he wasn't Greek. He didn't speak Greek. And so there's no reason to learn Greek, but they spend an enormous amount of time in Greek because Greek is the language of their New Testament. Greek was the language that Paul wrote in. Greek was the language of paganism and Gnosticism.
All the anti-Yahowah.
Right. So is it possible that the vast preponderance of those who have PhDs in religion, who have been to seminary and to Bible school, don't know the implications of the call stem, the imperfect conjugation, or the infinitive construct? Yeah, I think it's likely. It's a shame.
What a fraud.
It's a shame. Yeah, you ought not be pretending to be speaking on behalf of God if you don't even know the language in which he spoke. And why do it half-heartedly? Why ignore all of these elements which help us better understand what is being conveyed?
And they all claim it.
Yeah, they all claim it's divinely inspired, and then they...
I want to know the truth. I want to share the truth. Gosh, it's disgusting.
Yeah, it is indeed. So, this is that he spoke to the house of Yisrael for the purpose of drawing near by saying, if, this is M. Now, M in Hebrew introduces a conditional clause. So, if, whenever, and behold, only if. And so what follows now is there are 5 conditions being laid out to receive the benefit. The benefit is to be rescued and delivered from human influences, particularly national and militaristic influences. So that's the benefit. And there's 5 conditions for receiving that benefit. Now, one of the things that I think is a shame of the Christian religion is that they want to jump right to the benefit, which is salvation, but they don't ever consider what you're being saved from, what you're being delivered from, or saved to. They never consider who God actually is and what he has offered. And they never consider what it is that God is saving us from, and in this case, it's human government, particularly militaristic government. Who's the mightiest military in the history of the world?
The United States.
It would be true. Second only to the United States in ancient history would be Rome.
Rome. They were unbelievable.
So that's what he's saving us from. So there's no God bless America.
No.
Now, the other thing that Christians almost universally ignore is that most all of Yahowah's promises, and I'm saying most all just because I don't want to claim that it's all when there might be an exception, but every one of the important promises that Yahowah makes are contingent upon us doing something.
Walk away.
In this case, there are 5 contingencies. If you don't know these 5 contingencies, if you don't understand the 5 contingencies, if you don't accept the 5 contingencies, if you don't act upon the 5 contingencies, you will not receive the promise. Yeah, the benefit is wholly and completely predicated on you coming to know, understand, accept, and respond to the 5 conditions. One by itself isn't going to do it. You say, well, God knows what's in my heart. Doesn't care. He probably does, but no, actually he doesn't.
Well,
But if he did, it wouldn't matter.
No.
It didn't matter. Now, this is going to talk about heart twice.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to examine what it means by taking something to heart in this particular case.
Yeah, without.
And he says,
Yeah, nothing. Wait, I'm sorry.
So, here's the first. If, with all your heart, leb, your inner being, that which constitutes your most authentic nature and becomes the very fabric of your life, the place where that which is known, understood, and accepted serves to provide perspective, guiding your thoughts and conduct, becoming the source of your emotions and motivations, goals and ambitions, preferences and purpose, volition and judgment. If, with all your heart, you return to Yahowah, you change, turn around, go in the opposite direction, and come back. This was the call participle active, a literal verbal adjective whereby the subject acts and the object participates. Ooh, that's interesting. So if you return to Yahowah. So that's the first condition. With all your heart, you return to Yahowah. With everything that constitutes your most authentic nature, you return to Yahowah. Now, what does that presuppose? If you're being required as a condition to return to Yahowah, where are you presently with regard to Yahowah?
You're in the wrong path.
That's right. If you're being told that you need to change, doesn't that mean that everyone in this audience had the wrong attitude, the wrong approach?
Yeah, he's talking to him.
Yeah, and does sense the verb here also means to turn around, shub. They're all going in the wrong direction.
That's right.
So in this audience, these people were estranged from God.
Yes.
They had to change, and they had to go in the opposite direction.
Yes. Depart, remove yourself from, those things that, any dictionary would tell you.
Would any part of that be untrue relative to socialist secular humanists?
But you still have to depart. You can depart from religion and still go down politics road, or you can, or if you just depart from everything, if you don't go to God, you're still down the wrong road.
But what this only says one thing.
Yes.
You've got to change your heart. With all your heart, with all of your nation, you return to Yahowah. So this says that everyone who is listening to this message was headed away from Yahowah. And that would be true of socialist secular humanism today. It would be true of Christianity today. It would be true of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam, as well as Rabbinic Judaism.
Correct.
That for any of those individuals to return to God, they need to change. They need to go in the opposite direction. Now, by the fact that this was written as they call participle active, it means, and this is pretty neat, that if we, with all of our heart, our inner nature, if we change and begin this process of returning to Yahowah, Yahowah will be influenced by that choice.
Yes.
And so we will get God to help us along that way, so long as we take the initiative in this regard.
Yeah, that's the Hiffle, right? Hiffle.
Well, no, it's just it's the advantage here of the participle, the active participle.
Okay.
But yes, the Hiffle would convey the same concept.
Okay.
Now, it's to is from El in the direction of the Almighty, Yahowah, and Yahowah, Yod-He, Wah-He, a hand reaching down to us, a person standing up next to a tent peg, which means to increase, to secure a home, and then another person standing up, reaching up to God. The two He's mean Pay attention.
Now, in light of what we've been learning with Roy, it's also, I've kind of changed my, with the where I've also included to increase us.
Yes, of course that's what it means.
Looking at it a little bit deeper than
yes, that's exactly what it means. Yeah, the letter Wah in Hebrew, which is depicted by the tin peg, means to increase. That's the primary meaning. It means to add to. It means to add to and to increase. The two people standing on both sides of the wall are being increased. They're being added to. And they're also being brought together. They represent Abraham and Sarah as the covenant. They're being increased. They're being empowered. They're being enriched. They're growing in stature and capability while being protected and sheltered by Yahowah and his family. All because Yahowah has reached down and out to them with an open hand, and they have paid attention and reached up to God and taken a stand with him. That's Yahowah's name.
Yeah.
Comprised of 3 letters, one of which is repeated. Those 3 letters represent 3 of the 5 vowels in the Hebrew language, among the 22 letters in the Hebrew language, all of which are easily pronounceable. So this will bring you not to Allah, not to Jesus, not to the Lord,
but to
Yahowah. And then we find the second statement, choosing to turn away from and removing accordingly. And we'll consider what in a moment. All right, so the first condition is, with all of our heart, we return to Yahowah. Choosing, this is the second, to turn away from and removing accordingly the foreign, pagan, and worthless gods from among you. So Yahowah is saying here that not only do we need to change our direction to approach him, we need to choose to turn away from and remove the influence of foreign, pagan, and worthless gods. The verb chur means electing of our own volition, forsaking, rejecting, getting rid of, bringing an end to while avoiding and abolishing. This is in the hifl, imperative, active. All right, the hifl, the subject is the actor, and it causes the object to participate in the action. So this is speaking to us. So we're the subject, we're the actor. And then that means that we influence and bring into the action the subject. Now, the subject here is false gods. Now, you'd think, now, how in the world could he use the hifl in this case? Well, the reason is that, well, false gods can't do anything on their own. By us rejecting them, we diminish their influence in our lives and in the lives of others.
And that's all it takes.
That's all it takes. Yeah, that's really all it takes. So the hifl says that if you act, there will be a benefit. There will be a direct consequence of your acting. The imperative is the principal voice of volition in Hebrew.
You know what?
There are 3 of them, but the imperative is the dominant voice of volition. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you know what the ancient Nekar is translated as disaster and calamity.
Yeah,
it's just strange and alien.
Right, there's foreign gods, yeah, disastrous, yeah, no question.
That should give you a clue.
Yeah, but chur here, this choosing to turn away and removing, is the hifl stem, which means that our actions will elicit a response based upon the action of the verb. The action of the verb is to remove and to turn away from. So if we remove and turn away from the false gods, they will be removed from our nature, from our lives, from influencing us. And the imperative is the voice of volition, which means that under the auspices of free will, this is our choice. We have that choice. God gave us that choice. We can embrace false gods, or we can reject them. It's our choice. Each choice has a consequence, but it's our choice. Free will. And then, as you said, nekar means alien and valueless, incomprehensible and improper, the pretended disguise, someone else's disastrous and ruinous, another person's mistaken and feigned pretense of strange gods. Man's made a lot of gods.
Yeah. And
They're called by a lot of different names. All equally false. And it's this notion that, well, they provide people with hope. Well, God's saying that they're valueless. False hope is counterproductive. It's disastrous and ruinous. So this notion that we shouldn't condemn them, that we should tolerate them, is mistaken. Because these are all feigned pretenses of gods made in man's image. So he wants us to turn away from and remove these foreign, pagan, and worthless gods from among us, from our midst. Then we get to the third.
He tells you who they are next.
Yeah. Well, he wants all of them removed, but he lists one in particular.
Yeah.
So he wants them all removed. That would be Lord, Jesus, Christ, Allah, Buddha. He wants them all removed.
Shiva.
Shiva. But there's one in particular that is the most troubling.
Yeah.
And that one is the one that he names by name. Astartes. In fact, he writes it in the plural. The Astartes. And it's Astartes. So it's interesting that he, first of all, preceded the name with a definite article. Because I don't say the Kirk or the Scott.
No.
But I will speak of titles with a definite article. So by introducing the definite article here, we're dealing with a title. And the fact that it was written in the plural, there are a variety of titles. And so the Astartes are the queens of heaven, the mothers of God, and the virgins with child. Do you know any religion that claims that somebody is the queen of heaven, mother of God, and is the virgin with child?
I think it has to do with Roman Catholicism.
Yeah.
It came from Babylon.
Yeah, the basis of Christianity came right out of the pages of the Babylonian religion. No hiding it. No question about it.
No, nobody can fight that. Nobody can argue that point. So.
That point cannot be argued. That Astarte represents the queens of heaven, the mother of God, and the virgins with child, and that this is the principal connection between Babylon and Roman Catholicism. Anyway, it's Astarte. It's corrected from the errant Masoretic vowel pointing of Ashtoreth. And Astarte is the principal pagan Mother Earth goddess that was synchronized into the religions of the Sumerians, the Philistines, the Canaanites, the Egyptians,
right?
The Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Phoenicians. In the Phoenicians, she was the Lady of Byblos, which means she was the Lady of the Bible. The Syrians, the Persians, the Indians, the Greeks, the dastardly Romans, the Carthaginians, the Cypriots, and of course the Christians. She's also known as Ishtar, the star of heaven, from which Easter got its name, Astarte, Isis, Aphrodite, Venus, India, Diana, and Mary. She is either the consort of or the daughter of the Lord, Baal, El, Ra, Osiris, Tammuz, Asher, Sin, Zeus, or Jupiter. Actually, you should say she is the consort, daughter, or mother.
Yeah. Well, you have a repeating God every year. You can be
right.
Mother of wife too.
Yeah. It's a lot of incestuous interactions and the Parthenon of pagan gods.
Mm-hmm.
She was called the Queen of Heaven, which is affirmed in Yirmiyah, Jeremiah. That's a passage that in a future program we're going to elaborate on. She was known principally as the Mother of God, the Virgin and Madonna with Child, the basis of Mary worship in Roman Catholicism. She was Lord of the Horns. The name itself is based on Ashar and Ashtara. This is revealing.
Yeah.
Her name means to become rich by increasing one's flock while taking a tithe.
That was good. That was good.
Can you say Christianity? Can you just say religion in general?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all going to take a tithe. Yeah, we're going to increase one's flock and take a tithe. Okay, Whore of Babylon indeed. Also, so now we're dealing with the next condition. And also, choose to fashion through unwavering preparation and confident determination, kun, your heart for Yahowah. All right, so kun, this is what he's asking us to do with our lev. Just in case you didn't understand the full implications of heart. It means to elect to form, to confirm, and to develop. Under the auspices of free will, because this was influenced by the imperative mood. Establish so as to be sure and enduring. Direct, appoint, and affirm. Prepare and trust. Be steadfast, standing firm, stable, secure, and upright with regard to your heart. The Hiphil stem reveals that our influence of our heart causes it to respond in this way, while the imperative mood tells us that doing so should be our choice. While the active voice conveys that if you initiate this process, your heart will undergo these changes. So, with firmly fashioned, through unwavering preparation and confident determination. Does that sound like faith to you?
No.
That sound like a belief system to you?
They can't live together.
Does that sound like a leap into the darkness?
No.
No. How would you prepare your inner nature? How would you prepare with confident determination?
You study. You learn.
Study. Right.
Shamar.
Right. You shamar. You observe. You study. You learn. You contemplate. You come to understand. That's how you do it. So choose to firmly fashion, through unwavering preparation and confident determination, your heart for Yahowah. Not for Allah, not for Jesus, not for the Lord, for Yahowah.
Yeah, and it's never an emotional thing. We're talking about the heart like a greeting card type of definition. We're talking about your fabric, your thinking, your being. You know.
Yeah. Well, the heart can
I understand
serve to convey, your source of emotions.
Decision. This is your abstract thing. I mean, not abstract things. These are things that they're concrete. We can trust.
Right. In the ancient world, when heart was used, it meant your inner being, that which constitutes your most authentic nature and becomes the very fabric of your life. It's the place where that which is known, which is understood and accepted, serves to provide perspective, guiding your thoughts and conduct, becoming the source of your emotions and motivations, goals and ambitions, preferences and purpose, volition, judgment. Yeah. On behalf of Yahowah, and work with Him. Expend considerable energy and intensity and association with Him to serve with Him and engage with Him, cultivating that which grows and is productive with Him, while approaching Him exclusively. Him alone, by Himself, apart from any others.
I think that refers back to the first tablet of stones, eh?
Yep. Him exclusively. You can't embrace the Queen of Heaven. You can't be going down the wrong path. You can't choose to incorporate a Jesus or an Allah It has to be him exclusively. Then he will deliver you out of the hand and influence of the Pelishti, the foreign foes who invade the promised land, invoking fear while separating and terrorizing. Pelishti is to invade and to divide as an adversarial foreigner. It's transliterated Philistines. It's from Pelesh, which means to attack, to overrun, to attempt to occupy, to divide and to separate. Peleth, which is to wander away and flee, and Palosh, to roll, turning over and over again. It's related to Palatz, which means to terrorize and invoke instability and fear. It's a place of sorrow in Exodus 15:14. It's a place that a people and a nation vanquished by God in Psalm 108:10. Estranged from God in Joel 4:4. An enemy of Yisrael and David, actually Dode, and thus of God in 1 Samuel 17, chapter 17 through 22.
I also got to wallow in the dirt and roll in the dust.
Yeah, and that's the first.
Not a very good mistake.
Yeah, the first that I got, it's from Strong's, is where you found that, and
well,
that's where I got it initially, was from Strong's.
I'm sorry I got it there.
Yeah, and I chose to ignore it. I just, what I did here is, we need to realize that there are a lot of Hebrew words that at least aren't vowel-pointed such that they appear in the lexicons that are devoted to the words that the Masoretes marked to be in the Torah. And the verb which underlies Peleste is a great example of that. So you really have to go to the old interweb to look at what is the actionable base, the verbal base for Peleste. And that's where I found the meaning. And there's almost unanimity of affirmation here that Peleste is based on Peleth. And the verb means to wander, to attack, to overrun, to attempt to occupy, to divide and separate.
Well, that's certainly
and so the Pelish are foreigners who attack, who attempt to occupy, divide, and separate the promised land. So anyway, that's the best definition we have. But we're going to focus here in a moment on, in fact, not in a moment, but in another program on who they are. So what I'd like to do is, since these were interesting conditions, is let's go through these conditions as well as the benefit one more time, and then in a future program we're going to dial down into probably spending a better part of our program on what is represented by the Estart. And why the plural, and why the definite article, and what does Yahowah have to say specifically about the Estart? And we're going to also drill down, and probably first drill down on the Philistines.
Well, that's who they are today.
Yeah, who they are, what they represent, why God is willing to deliver us from them. So before we examine the villains of the story, Astarte and the Philistine, let's consider the thrust of Shamuel's message. And there's no better place to begin than by appreciating the implications of his name. As we began earlier, Shamuel, he listens to God. Isn't that where we all should begin?
Absolutely.
An appreciation for the message associated with Shamuel and his name makes what Shamuel has to say relevant and true, applicable and dependable. After listening to Yahowah, Shamuel shared what God had to say. And that's the reason why I would say that, if somebody wants to claim that Shamuel means that Shem is name, and so it's name of God, and they want to say, all right, and so it's name of God, and he spoke to the God named Yahowah, I don't have a problem with that. But I always find that context is the best way to properly translate everything.
Right.
And the context of the entire book of Shamuel is of Shamuel listening to Yahowah and then sharing with the house of Israel what Yahowah had to say.
He does what we don't do, we were never taught to do about prayer. He actually asks a question and then he shuts up and listens.
Correct.
He doesn't, give me.
Right, and he will start off by saying, this is my take on this. And then you'll go to Yahowah and say, all right, this is my take on this, but I want to know your perspective.
Right.
And one of the things that is troubling to God is that Christians in particular, and Muslims absolutely, they're praying all the time. Why do you think that you as a Christian or as a Muslim have something to say that's going to be interesting to God? Don't you think just for a moment that what God has to say might be more useful, might be more pertinent?
Yeah, well, everybody wants to teach the teacher,
Right. So, why would you go and yabber away at the Creator of the universe as opposed to listening to the Creator of the universe? Wouldn't you want to listen to him and then respond?
You would think.
And one of the things, too, and this is the point that Yosha made, why in the world are you asking him for all this stuff?
When you got the Torah right across the street.
Right. The vast preponderance of this, you don't need to listen. You don't need to ask. He's already provided the answer. And there's nothing you can do to irritate somebody more than asking them a question that they have already provided the answer. It shows that you're selfish because you haven't taken the time to read the answer. The answer is there. Read it. You want to know God's will for your life? Read the Torah. That's just right. He tells you what his will is. So why in the hell are you asking him?
I've had a lot of people. I pray every day that he'll tell me what his will for me is.
Yeah.
But you want to get a job.
I'll guarantee you that's one thing I've never asked him. In fact, I don't pray to him.
No.
I listen to him. I listen to him and I respond to him. That's it.
Worked for Samuel.
It works for Shamuel. It works for me. Okay, recognizing that we are now party to God's thoughts, let's consider the message the prophet conveyed one statement at a time. First, Shamuel consistently spoke to, actually promised, and habitually declared a message on behalf of Almighty God, recognizing the unfolding and ongoing consequence of his statements throughout the whole of time, always claiming and genuinely professing to the entirety of the household, family, and home, the lineage and successive generations, which would be related by birth, of Yisrael, of those individuals who engage and endure with God, who participate and strive with God, and who are empowered by the Almighty, as did Sarah. That's the opening statement. So as a result of listening to what Yahowah had to say, Shamuel was in a position to accurately convey God's message, something he did with great regularity. He listened and he spoke consistently and continually. It's the message for all of us. Our testimony can be similarly relevant, equally reliable, so long as we observe this prophet's pattern. We have a good friend, Larry, who typically joins us on this program. Larry has a Facebook site which he entertains lots of folks on, and his pattern is exactly the same as Shamuel. He shares what Yahowah said. Period.
Exactly.
He doesn't care if you like it or don't like it. Yeah, like it or lump it. Doesn't care. But he knows that what he's saying is true because all he does is counters everything that is brought up with Yahowah's testimony.
Yeah, exactly. He quotes it. This is exactly what Yahowah said about this.
Yeah.
It's the best translation you can find.
Yep.
There.
So while we mentioned this before, Israel is sometimes deployed to depict a nation at odds with Yah. The name was conceived to represent God's chosen people. Yisrael is his family, with whom he has a covenant. This is why Sarah's name, who was Abraham's wife and Ishak's mother, is found between Ish, individual, and El, God, in Israel. And fortunately for all of us, there is an open invitation to become part of Yisrael and Yah's covenant. But Kirk, Scott, that invitation is only found in one place.
Right. The Torah.
It's only found in the opening book of the Torah. You know, God begins this whole thing by handing us an engraved invitation. But if you reject the Torah, you won't find it. Now, for those who are listening, who are currently unaware of the 5 conditions and 5 benefits of participating in the covenant, if you have been directed to this program, but you're unaware of the specific nature of Yahowah's 7 invitations to meet each year, then this isn't really the right program for you to be listening to. You'd be much better off if you would go now to the first 2 volumes of Yada Yah. You'll find it at yada.com. Do it now. First things first. If you go to yada.com, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be introduced to who Yahowah is, and you're going to engage him in the creation of the universe and his authorship of life. It's a fascinating revelation. By the time you're through with the first 4 or 5 chapters that correctly reveal what Yahowah had to say about creation, and that compare that to science, if you are not convinced that the author of that creation account is in fact Almighty God, then you are either irrational or closed-minded.
It's the only explanation.
Yeah, because the proof that is provided that the author of the creation account, the creator is the creator himself, is overwhelming. And it will, and there's no reason to go through the details now. No. But the proof is literally overwhelming. And then it moves from there to several chapters devoted. It moves from there to a chapter devoted to life in Eden, where we learned that there was no religion, no politics, no government authority, no militaries. That it was just Yahowah having an enjoyable and personal relationship with Adam, and then with Adam and Chawah. And so we consider the nature of the relationship Yahowah had with Adam and Chawah in the Garden of Eden, because that not only represents where we are headed. In year 6,000 Yah, 2033, Yah was going to return the entire earth to the conditions found in the Garden of Eden. So if you don't like the conditions, if you don't like what occurred in the Garden of Eden, you're not going to like eternity with Yahowah.
No point going through this, no.
Yeah, no point in going through this. And if you prefer religion, you won't find religion in the garden. If you love politics, you won't find politics in the garden. If you love patriotism, you're not going to find patriotism in the garden. There are no pledges of allegiance. No, can't even give a tithe. Yep. So that's the nature of the next 2 chapters. And then it's followed by a chapter on the flood with Noah, so that you understand why God reset humankind, at least humankind within the Salma, in that particular place and time. And you come to understand the scientific basis for the flood, which is really insightful.
Staggering.
It's staggering. Yeah, it's just like the creation account. You cannot read it with an open mind and walk away not recognizing that the author of this story is the creator God of the universe.
Yeah, he saw it happen.
Yep. And what you find is that covenant is identical to the covenant that he reveals next, and that's the next 3 chapters of Yada Yah. Explains the covenant as it was established with Abraham, because there's only one covenant, and the terms and conditions that Abraham was asked to accept are the same for us. And the benefits that were offered to Abraham are the same for us. 5 benefits, 5 conditions.
Right.
And if you don't know what those are, well, I could summarize them here for you, and as Kirk could do, Scott could do,
Sure.
and that we know and have accepted out of the context of the whole discussion, without a very thoughtful presentation of them, I'm not sure they would do you a lot of good.
No.
But at least so that there is some semblance of understanding here. The 5 conditions for participating in the covenant are as follows. First, that we walk away from our country, from our society, that we disassociate from everything associated with Babylon, the whore of Babylon, who is Astarte, Mother of God, Queen of Heaven.
Right.
That we disassociate from Bibles, which is the being with the Lord veil and with confusion. That we walk away from religion, from governance, from politics. We disassociate from these things. In fact, the first condition of the covenant, which is the first thing that Abram had to do before he and Yahweh engaged in a relationship, happens to be the very thing that Shemuel is laying out right here. It doesn't change. That's the first requirement. It's the prerequisite for engaging in a relationship with God is walking away from these human institutions. The second is to walk to God and become perfect. And there's only one way, only one path that Yahweh has provided. And that path is through his invitations to meet. 7 steps, 6 steps that lead to the final definition, the destination. And then he says to trust and rely on him, which is exactly what is found in Shemuel's conditions, to trust and rely upon him. The 4th condition is to closely examine and carefully consider the instructions and conditions associated with the relationship agreement, which you can only do by reading the Torah. And finally, if you're a man, to be circumcised and to circumcise your children, so that we all share the sign of the covenant. The benefits, then, is that we become immortal, we're perfected, we're adopted into Yahweh's family, we are enriched, and we are empowered. These are the benefits of the first 4 Moed Mikre, all 4 of which were fulfilled by Yahusha in year 4000 Yah, 33 CE, on our Roman Catholic pagan calendars.